This video is on the objective make a conclusion and interpret the results for a hypothesis test for a proportion, right, a population proportion. This is using the p-value approach as opposed to the critical value approach. And this is number 2. This is the second video I'm doing on a question from your homework related to this objective. So hopefully you've watched the first one, where I basically took you through all the steps of a hypothesis test for a proportion. This time I'm going to do a lot less explanation. It's pretty straightforward, this kind of question. So again, if you're unfamiliar with the topic or you want to see more about what they're doing, click on More Instruction, please, and look at their videos, their examples, their notes, and hopefully those help you. Alright, so here, a local cable company claims that the proportion of people who have internet access is less than 63%. So you see that that'd be like P proportion, right? P is less than 0.63, and that doesn't involve equality, so it's the alternative hypothesis here. Then the null hypothesis would be that P is greater than or equal to 0.63, but we're only assuming the equal part. All right, so we're going to be assuming that P equals 63%, right? That this proportion of people who have internet access is equal to 63%. All right, so the hypotheses are formed, and then they said to test this claim, a random sample of 800 people is taken, and it is determined that 478 of these people have internet access. Now, they set up the hypotheses. It's a left-tailed test, right? Left-tailed test. P is less than 0.63. But we don't need to know any of that. I mean, you could figure out what the sample proportion is. Then you can find the test statistic, right, which would be a z-score, and then find the area to the left of that test statistic for the p-value. But they've already told us here what the p-value is, so I don't need to do all that. It's already done for me. The p-value was determined to be 0.029. So 2.9% p-value. It says come to a conclusion and interpret the results for this hypothesis test for a proportion using a significance level of 5%. So this is your alpha. So remember, once you have the p-value determined, very simple to make your decisions. You compare the p-value to alpha. If the p-value is less than or equal to alpha, you're going to reject the assumption of the null hypothesis. If the p-value is greater than alpha, you're not rejecting, you're going to fail to reject the assumption from the null hypothesis. So here we have 0.029 as our p-value, 5% or 0.05 is our alpha. The p-value is less than or equal, but definitely less than alpha. And if that's the case, if the p-value is less than or equal to alpha, you're going to reject the null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis here, that p equals 0.63, we're rejecting that. Say no. Meaning we're going to accept the alternative hypothesis, that p is less than 0.63, and that was the claim that's being tested. So we're going to accept the claim, or we would say that there's enough evidence to support the claim. Again, because we rejected the null hypothesis. All right, so read through these carefully. So it's either the first one or the third one, because they start with reject the null hypothesis, but the reasoning is different. Right? It's this one here. Reject the null hypothesis because the p-value is less than the significance level. That's why you're rejecting, not because 0.63 is greater than 0.05. This has nothing to do with it. It's the reason we're rejecting the null hypothesis is because of that comparison of the p-value to the significance level. And then look at the statement after. There is enough evidence to suggest the claim. Right? The claim was that the proportion of people who have internet access is less than 63%. And that's what I said a second ago. There is enough evidence to support the claim or suggest that the claim is actual. So it's this third option here. And then wonderful, and again, please read your answer explanations. Make sure your reasoning was correct, and if you got it wrong, hopefully you can figure out where you went wrong, and then do better the next time you see a question like that. All right, so hopefully listening to me here and watching that first video I did as well on this objective, and also looking at the more instruction. Hopefully all this helps you when you're working on this kind of problem on your own. And thank you for watching.